following is a fan-made reading of the web serial Pale by J.C. McCrae. The original text can be found at palewebserial.wordpress.com. If you'd like to donate to the author, please visit patreon.com/wildbow. Stolen Away, 2.5, Avery.
"How's it going over there?" Miss Hardy asked. "It's going okay. Hi, Miss Hardy," Aubrey said. "Stop hesitating, Faith," Mr. Bader shouted. Avery stood at one corner of the field with two of her teammates, Audrey and Aubrey, twins from a grade above her. They were doing Mr. Bader's 3-goal challenge, and for the process to go smoothly, the girls who weren't playing defense or running point were doing their best to keep the balls in bounds, or give out balls. 3 small goals have been set up in a triangle, with a player on defense at each goal. One player had to take a ball, navigate through the cones in the center, get past the defense, score, pivot, and repeat. 3 times in total. It was supposed to drill them on responding quickly. Miss Hardy was on the other side of the fence that separated the field from the parking lot, holding a cardboard box under one arm, the bottom edge resting on her hip. Her eyes, half-lidded and decorated with eyeliner, Avery thought of as almost Egyptian style, were scanning the field. Avery wished she could be that casually cool. "Did you get fired?" Audrey asked. Avery looked in alarm at the little cardboard box. But Miss Hardy chuckled. "No, don't worry. Classwork to go over this weekend." "Going home a bit earlier today, then?" Avery asked. "I am." "Shoot. I was hoping to swing by for a minute after practice, ask for advice on something." "Is it important? Can it wait until Monday?" Miss Hardy asked. "Not too important, I don't think, and yeah," Avery said, shrugging. "I guess." A spattering of wet droplets came down from the sky, prompting Avery to look up. If it was going to rain, the weather was really doing its level best to sneak up on them. A heavy cloud cover, but no real hint of the actual rain starting. The air was hot, making it uncomfortable to breathe. "Faster, Faith," Mr. Bader barked. "I'd rather see you make a mistake than freeze. You can learn from a mistake, but if you freeze, you're just holding the rest of us up." Miss Hardy said, "Mr. Lai is going to meet me in the parking lot Monday morning and help me move some things for a home project into my car. If you wanted to swing by and chat with the two of us." "It can't be a one-on-one?" "Not typically, no. I do trust Mr. Lai, and I think you can too, if that helps. If you'd rather it was a group of other students, we could do that at lunchtime on Monday. Depending on what you wanted to talk about, I'm sure I could round up some students." "Okay," Avery said. "Probably not that. I might think on it over the weekend and show up on Monday." "Sounds good," Mrs. Hardy said. "Offer for the lunch meat stands." A ball was kicked over in their direction. "I got it, you talk," Audrey said, running after it. Avery knew who those students at the lunch meet might be. 3 of the boys in her class, a couple of others in school. It was a bit frustrating. Avery considered the time she'd opened up to Miss Hardy about her loneliness to be a life-changing moment. A few quiet questions from this cool, caring teacher, and she'd broken down, opened up about everything. Her teacher had listened, considered, connected, and cared. But ever since, they hadn't really had one-on-one talks. Bits of advice, yes, but always brief. Or slightly longer talks, if Miss Hardy was going somewhere, or Avery was going somewhere, and they happened to cross paths. If the conversation continued for more than a couple of minutes, Avery got this. The deflection the guardedness of it, where Miss Hardy would want to make it into a group discussion instead. Mr. Lai had a gay brother, and was Miss Hardy's friend, so he was usually the person there. Miss Hardy and Mr. Lai had something like a general LGBT student group where Ian, Justin, and Noah from her class, and a larger group of the older teenagers and their friends, would go talk with the teachers as referees. Avery didn't even really like Ian and Noah, felt iffy on Justin, and being around the older teenagers made her feel like she was sitting through dinner with her family, except she didn't even know them or feel any familiarity. She'd gone once and didn't feel eager to go again. It wasn't what she wanted or needed. She wanted the one-on-one time with Miss Hardy, but she did understand what Miss Hardy had said about the boundaries teachers had to maintain with students. That didn't mean it didn't suck butt. It was why she had been so happy to talk for more than a few minutes with Miss Hardy last week. Touching base, even if it was a bit clinical. How are things with your family? Are you managing with class? Focus, Melissa! We need you here on Earth, not in La La Land! I could hear him from my desk in the classroom at the second floor, Miss Hardy said. That's not so bad, Avery said. Does he raise his voice to you? Some, she said. He's a good coach, Aubrey added. Makes sense, Miss Hardy said. He had some background. Audrey had fetched the ball, kicking it over to one of the players on defence. The player manoeuvred the ball to sit beside their little netted goal. She jogged up to join them. He's really good when it comes to training us in groups of 2 or 3, when it's just a couple of us who are wanting to get really polished at something, Avery said. He's good as a coach like this, but as a gym teacher? Hey, Audrey said. He's fine. I don't know if he knows how to deal with the students who don't give a crap, Avery said. That, I can say, is never easy, Miss Hardy said. She thought of Lucy yesterday, the sheer emotion. A few months ago, Miss Hardy had reached out and Avery had broken down. The dam had cracked and everything had poured out. It had needed to happen. It had been important. It had been healthier in the long run. The dam wasn't supposed to be there. And Lucy hadn't had a Miss Hardy, she supposed. In her analogy, she wasn't sure if Lucy was building up the dam herself, dropping rocks on top, or if she'd gone hacking at it, knife in hand, with enough intensity that she'd accidentally cut herself. I think he gives some of my friends a harder time than others, Avery noted, watching the girls play. Avery! Mr. Bader shouted. She jumped, despite herself. Oh, it was her turn. She felt her face heat up as she ran. Mr. Bader threw a ball, and she bumped it with her chest, then the side of her leg, turning to follow it. Through the posts, straight at Melissa, who had taken up roost by one goal, playing goalie more than she was playing defence. Melissa wasn't allowed to use her hands, though. Avery paused, seeing if she could bait Melissa out. Don't dally! Mr. Bader called out. Avery drew back, feinted, then kicked hard. The goal was small, barely 2 strides across, and the soccer ball bounced off the side. I know you can do better than that! She felt the flush at her face as Faith kicked the ball out to the side. Part of the exercise was to score when approaching from odd angles, and Avery decided to apply that, approaching the goal from the side. Faith met her halfway. Avery dribbled around Faith, put her body firmly between Faith and the ball, and kept it there until the little goal was just to her left, and she could let the ball roll in without much of a kick. Step it up, Faith! Last ball, last player, last goal. Avery met the ball, then went at the goal hard. She wasn't much of a player when it came to accuracy. Not in basketball, not in soccer, and not even really in hockey, which was her favourite sport. But she was comfortable with her handling of the soccer ball, or puck. She decided to play to her strengths. Run fast, keep that ball right where she wanted it, as she ran towards Samantha, and maintained control of it as she slipped past Samantha. She saw Samantha stick her foot out and adjusted her own footing. Samantha's cleat scraped against her shin guard, but it didn't tap the ball. She dribbled the ball into the goal. "I want to see you practicing shooting, Avery. I didn't take hours of my day last week to give my forward shooting practice just for one of you to pretend it's not a thing." She nodded her acknowledgement, huffing, and bent forward with her hands on her knees. Her skin prickled with sweat and the ambient warmth. Samantha vacated the goal, leaving Avery in position as defence. Aubrey was already done trouncing Melissa. Avery waited for Aubrey to get to her, removing the ball from the goal and kicking it toward the collection of balls by Mr. Bader. Miss Hardy was speaking to Aubrey's sister. Avery watched Miss Hardy leave. Aubrey dealt handily with Melissa, then Faith. Aubrey had a good kick with killer accuracy. Avery watched as Mr. Bader punted the ball over the girl's head. She did the opposite of what Melissa had done and headed straight for her opponent. She paused for a moment to let her get the ball, then immediately went for it, not giving Aubrey the time to get centered, set her eyes on the goal, or shoot. Aubrey tried to feint, and Avery claimed the ball, kicking it back toward Mr. Bader. "Good, Avery! We need to work on that, Aubrey." Faith vacated her spot so Aubrey could take up position. Aubrey didn't, though. She paused. "Hey." Avery nodded. "Don't badmouth Mr. Bader to other adults, okay? It's pure luck we got a guy who can coach at all. I don't know if you remember Mrs. Burke last year, but I wasn't around last year." "Well, she was a mum who volunteered, and she barely knew the first thing about soccer. I know it's not your sport either, you're a hockey girl, but some of us are counting on doing well enough here that we can put it on our applications and use it to get into a half-decent school." People were already thinking about applying to schools? Wasn't that, 3 or 4 years away? "I'm a soccer player too," Avery said. "And I didn't say anything untrue. He was kind of a dick to my friend." "Get in position, Aubrey." "Kind of isn't good enough, okay? If he breaks an actual rule, and you have proof, fine, I guess." "Proof like what? Should I secretly bring my phone with me to gym class and practice and record stuff?" "You should keep from saying unsubstantiated stuff you're not sure about, with I thinks and kind ofs, when rumors spread and it's his career and our team on the line." Aubrey started jogging to her spot. Avery jogged with to maintain the conversation. "Isn't it better if we say something so it can be fixed?" "This isn't social time, ladies!" "Not when the obvious fix is cancelling the team, suspending him for a while, or replacing him. My mum's on the school board, and they always take the easy way." "Avery!" Mr. Bader shouted. One word, harder than before. He pointed. She jogged back to her position, arriving just as the ball was thrown for Aubrey's twin sister. She worried there would be a reaction or a continuation of the conversation, as she foiled Audrey and claimed the ball. Instead, there was just a tight smile, and then Audrey went over to replace Melissa. Audrey wasn't very good, in contrast to her sister. Maybe that's why she didn't seem to care as much. There was a possibility that the two girls would talk, and there would be more said about it next practice, though. Avery wasn't really sure what else to do about it. She'd spent a lot of time last night, mulling over Lucy and her situation. What it would be like. What she could do. Lucy, angrily telling her and Verona how she felt like she had no backup. How easily and casually she had offered Avery some of that backup at the dinner table. She wasn't sure whether or not she had felt glad she'd done this, felt like it wasn't enough, or felt like she'd made things worse with her team. Which maybe kind of fit with what Lucy had described. Not ever knowing. Avery did her 3 defends, then vacated the goal. Mr. Bader set her the task of rounding up the balls and stuffing them into bags. Aubrey got the balls from the other end of the field, kicking them over one by one, while her sister stopped them and rounded them up. There were no more comments. Mr. Bader called the end to practice, and the girls split up. Maybe a third headed for the showers in the school, The rest headed to the parking lot, where parents had started to gather, or just started on their way home. Avery's dad stood by the car. She could see the back seat was full, and Grumble was in the passenger seat. She jogged over. "Hey," Melissa said. Avery turned, guarded. "Ever think about doing cross-country?" Avery's classmate was sweating more than most. Probably having that crimped hair she had barely cut since she was in grade 3 was acting to partially insulate her. Even pulled back into a high ponytail, it draped her shoulders and neck. "Not really? Why?" "Because your aim isn't really that hot, but man, I'm jealous of how fast you are." "I don't really like running for running's sake. It doesn't feel like there's much of a point." "Okay, I was just figuring." Avery shrugged. She didn't really get Melissa. "Good practice?" Avery's dad asked. "Eh." He moved to hug her, and she protested. "I'm sweaty." And it's weird getting a dad hug in front of everyone. "I don't care," he said. He extended his arms. She gave him a perfunctory hug. "Where do I sit?" "You're going to have to squeeze." "Can I sit in the far back?" she asked. The car was a hatchback sedan, with a spacious back storage area. "Not allowed. There's no seatbelts back there." She made a face. The back seat had Kerry strapped into her car seat, Declan in the middle seat with his handheld game thing, and Sheridan, who kind of wasn't equipped to cede much seat space, either in terms of willingness and personality, or in terms of her fat butt. Avery squeezed past Kerry, the toes of Kerry's shoes dragging against her side, making her soccer jersey dirty when the whole of soccer practice hadn't. "Ooh, you're sweaty." "So are you," Avery said. Her kid sister's hair was plastered to her head. "What are you eating? That smells awful." "Grape apes." "Let me know when you're buckled in," her dad said. "They smell—" Avery had to fight to get in beside Declan, who didn't take his eyes off his game or help in the slightest. "Almost like cough syrup. Juice that's been sitting on the counter overnight, and faintly of musty butt." "Delicious cough juice butt," Kerry said, her mouth so full of chewy purple candy she could barely speak or keep the chewed candy in bounds. "How would you know what butt smells like? Smelling a lot of musty butts, Avery?" "I have to smell you most days, Sheridan." "Hit. Kerry waved the bag toward Avery's face. Avery pulled back, almost headbutting Declan. "Get out of her face, Avery!" Declan said, his voice rising in pitch, like he was standing on a cliff's edge. His eyes didn't leave the screen. "Move over, and I won't be so in your way." She found her space between him and the car seat. Not that it was much of one. The hard plastic of Kerry's kid seat scraped and jabbed. Then she had to fight to find the socket to plug the seatbelt into, while Declan bumped her with his hip a few times, trying to lay claim to a bit more seat real estate. When she leaned over toward him to get more length on the seatbelt, he dug his elbow into her side. She kicked his leg with the side of her cleats in retaliation. "Oh, you're so slippery, so gross," Declan protested. He pulled right, away from her. "Who said girls don't sweat? You leave a slime trail wherever you go." "How wrong you are. We don't sweat or play video games," Sheridan said. She touched something on the screen. "See?" No! What did you do? I didn't want to use him." "Lower your voice, Declan," their dad said. "My game! I've been playing that for 2 hours, you fat bitch!" "Oh," Kerry chimed in, digging into the bag of candy. "You shouldn't say that." "You shouldn't be playing a video game for 2 hours to begin with. And don't call your sister names," Avery's dad said. "I should get to call her names when she dragged my silver white onto the battlefield in the warning round. I needed that for the boss." He was being so loud, Avery had to cover her ear. "I will take away your advance gear if you don't calm down and apologize for calling your sister names." "She messed up my game!" "Declan." Should have saved, Sheridan said. You don't save in this game! Oh my god, I can't win now! You're very busy losing, actually, Avery's dad said. Privileges to your console. They hadn't left the parking space. Avery fended off the bag of grape apes that was being waved at her face. The artificial grape smell of it was thick in her mouth and nose. Can I, not be in this car? Avery asked. I could run home. I might even be able to get home before this entire thing is settled. She mentally defined settled as the end of the hostilities between Declan and Sheridan. She could probably run 5 laps around Kennet and solve the Carmine Beast thing solo before those two laid down arms. We were going to go get fast food, Avery's dad said. Your mum has a work thing in Thunder Bay. I'm not up to cooking. Stay seated. But... No, Avery. You ducked out on dinner early, but if you keep leaving mid-meal, skipping family dinners, or going away for weekends, you're going to end up a feral child. Stay seated. And Declan, if you can't give me the console and apologize in the next minute, you'll lose all game privileges. Declan was crying now. Droplets fell onto the screen, and he did his best to wipe them away without pressing anything or activating anything on the touchscreen. Declan! Kerry stuck the bag in Avery's face, a look on her face as though she thought this was a game. Avery snatched the bag from her 6-year-old sister's hand. Then, seeing the shock on Kerry's face, quickly folded and rolled up the top of the bag and pressed it into Kerry's lap. Stop. Please, Kerry. It smells so bad. I was so close to winning, Declan whined. This is hell, Sheridan said. Living with this is hell. You're not making it any easier, Declan said, through tears. Then he reached out and grabbed at Sheridan's side, twisting and pinching. Declan! Avery saw Kerry's face, going from the earlier shock to a tearless snivelling, like she was fighting the urge to get upset and break down into wailing. And then it was just noise and infighting. How are you doing, Grumble? Avery asked, over the noise, as her dad reached in her and Declan's direction, trying to take the game from Declan's hands. Grumble said something unintelligible, and made a stiff, so-so gesture, hand flat and waggling. Sheridan, being pinched and grabbed at, popped her seatbelt, opened the door, and escaped the car. Get back in the car, Avery's dad ordered. I'm going to walk home. I'll buy dinner with my own money. No, 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 Declan protested. The dad had a firm grip on one half of the handheld console. My friends are playing and I told them I'd win one by tomorrow. Sheridan, you're in trouble too. There was no call to take his game from him. I didn't take his game. Punish me later. It can't be worse than having to spend the next half hour doing drive-through. Avery popped her own seatbelt, escaping past Kerry to the other door. Avery, okay. You know what? You two watch each other. Stick together, come straight home. Sheridan, we'll talk about your punishment when you're home. Whatever. I was thinking I'd see my friends, Avery said. I think that's exactly what I didn't want to happen this weekend. I'd like to show your mum that if she has to keep going back there, she can trust me to keep a handle on things. Let Rowan... Avery paused as Kerry raised her voice, protesting about being hungry. Let Rowan do his thing with his girlfriend. Declan could go to his friends. I'll go hang with my friends. They said I'm welcome. If it keeps things more sane. She's not wrong, Sheridan chimed in. I wanted this to be an actual trial run. It's... Declan, please quiet down. My friend's going through a hard time, I think, Avery said. I don't Kerry. Okay, fine. Stay in contact by phone. Let me know what you're doing. Bye, Grumble, Avery said. Love you. Love you, he mumbled back. Love you, Dad. I love you too. Kerry, please. I told you you could only have a treat if you behaved. Avery backed away from the car, then started walking in the general direction of the burger bin. She pulled out her phone. Why are you walking beside me? Sheridan asked. I'm walking in the direction of the burger bin. You? Avery asked, still looking at the phone. Same. Avery texted a quick message to Lucy. What's this thing with your friend having a hard time? Sheridan asked. Are you asking because you actually care? Avery asked, putting her phone away. I'm curious. She ran into her ex-stepdad yesterday. He bailed on them 5 years ago. She kind of flipped. Did a number on his car. Wow, go her. I'm not sure if it's a go her moment. It was more sad than anything. She had a bunch to say about the way people have been treating her in general. Like my coach. This is the black one? Avery gave Sheridan a look. What? Is it racist to ask that? Genuine question, 'cause I don't know. And I don't keep track of your friends' names. It's Lucy, yeah. I was going to ask one of my teachers. Avery trailed off, checking her phone. Lucy. It was a no on coming over. She was doing dinner with her aunt and mum. She hadn't even wanted to talk about it earlier in the day. Avery felt the gulf. You were going to ask your teacher what? Some stuff in general. About friendships and maintaining friends, and it'd be nice to ask about team stuff, because I might have messed that up just before you guys picked me up. And I'm kind of on a team with those two, and I don't know. It'd be nice to just have some perspective. I thought I'd ask her about dating advice and programs, but that'd be dumb. Which teacher? The one who talked to Mum and Dad? Black hair, intense makeup. Yeah. You realize she's a cat lady, right? And there's some rumors about her. You might want to go somewhere else for your dating advice. She really helped me out the one time, Avery said. She's given me advice before, and it was good. She's cool. Sheridan snorted. She is. It was pretty funny how she totally freaked out Mom and Dad on an existential level. I don't think it was existential. Your existence, anyway. They're like, oh shit, Avery exists. Avery frowned. Right. That quite wasn't how it happened. Nah, it happened to me too. They were busy figuring out all the firsts with Rowan, like he was their first teenager, their first kid who had to deal with high school, who had to deal with school administration, who wanted to go to summer camp. And then you guys start appearing, and here I am, just chewing on the popcorn, waiting until I've got a space of my own, and then I lose space as Kerry moves in. Right, Avery said. You're too nice about stuff. It's why I give you a hard time. Try to shake you out of all this little rut you've dug for yourself. I don't think it helps like you think it does. Maybe. Well, can't give you much advice on that stuff you want to ask your teacher, Sheridan said. I don't have any friends, or teams, or hobbies, or anything I really care about all that much. A boyfriend would be so nice, but dating advice? Psh. Avery gave her sister a sidelong look. Don't pity me or anything. I'm not unhappy. Life's fine. It's just dull and super annoying when you're whining, or Declan's being noisy, or Kerry clings. One more year of classes, and then I can apply to a shitty university somewhere. I'll figure out what I want to do with my life in my freshman year at uni, like Mom, Dad, grumble and Gran did, and then my life finally starts.
Looking forward to that.
To getting rid of me? Sheridan asked the question with a hint of an accompanying snort.
A little bit,
Avery said.
And also looking forward to you maybe finding something to do that you're interested in, that isn't making the rest of us miserable. Picking on me, messing up Declan's game.
We can dream, Sheridan said. That was a little funny though, right? Avery made a face, and a so-so gesture, mostly to keep the conversation with Sheridan tolerable. From the way he made it sound, I accidentally messed him up in the perfect way. Maybe it's a special skill.
What career would even come of that? Do you end up Sheridan, Master of International Espionage?
That's not a career, you little loser.
Gonna text my friend, and if I can go over or do something with her, I should be out of your hair tonight,
Avery said.
Do me a favor and don't let me walk into traffic while I'm typing.
No promises. Avery sent a message to Verona. Is it okay if I come over for a while after dinner? Grabbing a burger at the bin. The reply came back fairly fast.
Bring me one. And fries? I'll pay you back. And can you stay over? I was thinking we should do the last few interviews.
Verona, dwelling on the interviews and the investigation. Avery nodded to herself. She replied, Berg might be cold by the time I get there. Verona replied, Microwaves exist. No prob. But there was the invitation to stay over. I want to listen, Avery thought to herself. When Lucy expressed her reservations about Mr. Bader, when people warned them about the fairy, when people warned them about the danger of the choir and how strong it was, told them not to get involved, the little regrets were stacking up. And she'd been told to be careful with Verona's dad, that he was weird. She typed out her reply. Will me staying over be okay with your dad and all? He's... She sent it like that. If she started reconsidering every message, she'd never send everything. Verona's reply was one word. Weird. Verona sent another message right after. Sheridan poked Avery in the side of the head to steer her around a gully in the sidewalk.
Thank you,
Avery murmured, looking up from the screen.
Being a good sister is a change,
Keep talking like that and I won't steer you around the next one.
Ha ha.
She read Verona's reply. Might be uncomfortable, but not unbearable. It's easier to go out tonight if we're at my place. Avery checked with Lucy. Lucy didn't say no. She told Verona she would stay over. The microwave hummed as Verona's fries heated up. Avery couldn't understand how she could eat them like that, when the microwave would change consistency, texture, moisture. She ate some of her own fries. She'd rather have them cold than eat them post-microwave. It was mostly about the salt, anyway. It was a late hour to be finishing dinner, about 8:15. Avery had stopped in at her house for 2 minutes to change clothes, and had arrived late, bearing a lukewarm burger and cold fries for Verona. Verona's house was so quiet. There was no television on that Avery could hear. No AC, no chatter. Verona didn't feel the silence as she peered in through the microwave door. The neighbours were too distant to be audible. The house was about the same size as Lucy's, and both were a little smaller than Avery's. But, like, one parent and one kid in each of their homes? Compared to Avery's place where there were 8 people, 8 people's stuff, and the little assistance features for Grumble that took up that extra space. More than the quiet, it felt dark. It was hard for her to identify why. The curtains were a little more drawn in at the edges of the windows. Verona had said her dad got migraines and had come home with a bit of a headache, so that made sense. But it didn't account for all of it. It was in the colour of furniture, where there weren't many solid reds, or yellows, or blues. It might have been the angle of the house, where the sun shone in through the side rather than the front. It might have been the mood. The two of them not really talking, and Verona's dad as this big unknown that hadn't even introduced himself. He was just upstairs, like a vague presence, as if they were in a cave, and he was the bear at the back of the cave that they didn't want to agitate. The microwave beeped, loud. "Hungry choirers tonight," Verona said. "Yeah," Avery said. "I wish we could do more. I was thinking, what if we got enough ribbon and the right animal, and I could use it to go over there?" "The forest ribbon trail?" "You can apparently use it as a way to get places. But I thought back to that conversation earlier, and what would we even do? Who do we save? How? And then I wondered if I'm being a coward and trying to just find excuses not to go and not to get entangled a whole lot more." "I think it's the kind of thing where we'd have to find a solution, then go after it," Verona said. "Going there every night looking for weak points hurts us more than it hurts them." "Feels wrong." Verona shrugged, nodding. She went to take a recently microwaved French fry, limp, and pulled her fingers away, sucking on them. Again, the quiet. No video games, no music. No mother that hummed every time she did the dishes, to the point that it seemed pathological. Lucy's place hadn't felt like this. There had been the stove, and Verona had been there. There had been stuff to show each other. Verona had put on music. Was it just Lucy's absence? "Are things going to be okay with you and Lucy?" Avery asked. Verona shrugged again. "Hope so." "That's it? Just hope so?" "I don't know what you expect. I can't say for sure. We've been through bad patches where we fought, and we're really bad at fighting with one another. We've been through serious patches when being friends wasn't as much fun because of other stuff going on, like my parents divorcing or her thing with Paul, and we just—" Verona shrugged for a third time. "Do what we could?" Avery frowned. Verona went on. "I don't think we've had a bad and serious patch in our friendship. I thought we were just dealing with some bad, but it was serious for her." "It should have been serious for us, too." Verona nodded. "I messed up so bad with Pam," Avery murmured. "I feel a bit sick about it now." "Did you decide what to do?" "Cutting contact. But then, can I really talk to Miss Hardy about stuff? Or am I risking entangling her, too? Where do we draw the line?" "I don't think it's that slippery a slope, Ave." "Still sucks." "It does." "Still leaves me anxious. Knowing about whether any other people I'm with are being entangled without my knowing it." "I wouldn't stress too much about that, but it's good to keep in mind, maybe." "I'm so worried about Lucy, too. That thing yesterday, it—" Avery stopped. There was a heavy thud, followed by two more. Bangs against a wall or floor. 3 bangs in total. Verona sighed. "What was that? Is he okay?" "That's how he calls me when he doesn't want to yell," Verona said. She handed Avery the packet of microwave-heated limp fries. "Excuse me." Verona headed upstairs. Avery set the packet of fries she didn't want to eat down on the counter, finished her own fries, and found the bin to toss out the extra fast food bag, the foil wrappers for the burgers, and wiped up the salt that had leaked out over the slate countertop. She did a little circuit around the ground floor,
Front hall, living room, dining room, and kitchen were arranged so they each took up a rough quarter of the house, each connecting to the room on either side. It was tidier than her house, but maybe not as clean. Grit behind the TV, salt from winter crusted in the little resting spot for boots by the back door. Nothing huge, and not anything that would make her think twice about eating or sleeping here, but different. She investigated a display cabinet that held little knickknacks and trinkets, along with chinaware that looked neat, but didn't really go together. She wanted to look at some figurines, so she went to pull out a dining room chair. It didn't budge, which was disconcerting. Chairs were supposed to move. Some investigation explained why. She wiggled the chair and it came loose, but there were little marks on the floor, like it had melted in. Verona, or her dad, had mopped and waxed the floor, and had done so while the chairs were under the table. The wax had gathered up around the legs, solidified, and it was Avery, not either of the two people who lived here, who had noticed that fact. The table was the same, and she gave it a light push, and it refused to budge a millimetre, despite not being an especially big table. The other three chairs, the one at the head of the table wasn't quite as deeply set. How long had it been that the chairs had been waxed into place like that? Or rather, how long had it been that these chairs hadn't been dragged out from under the table and sat on? The socket where the chair leg had stopped formed a bit of a crater. That depth, either they used a lot of wax for one mop and wax, which didn't really line up with the one chair being less deep set, or they'd done it over time, never eating at this dining room table, over a long period that had seen multiple house cleanings. It wasn't that she meant to snoop, but it was so alien to her, she couldn't help but wonder. It simultaneously made Verona make a bit more sense to Avery, and yet left Avery with a multitude of questions. It had, as best as she could count, been about 10 minutes that Verona had gone upstairs. She ascended the stairs and stood at the second stair from the top. The hallway extended across the upstairs, branching off to the left and right, into the bathroom and two other rooms. Verona stood at the end of the hall, in the doorway to Mr. Hayward's room, at the end of the hall. "You're just like her." Mr. Hayward's voice was deep, but not strong. It sounded almost plaintive. "You tune me out. You try to walk away while I'm talking to you." "I left my friend downstairs." "On our 10th wedding anniversary, she left early to go spend time with her friends. Writing on the wall, wasn't it? I came home that night alone to relieve the babysitter. Most couples would spend the night together on their anniversary at the very least. Have some intimacy. Didn't even have to be sex. I would have given her a foot rub or a massage. Do you remember that night? You would have been 9. "No," Verona said. "You don't remember the first thing you said to me?" "No." "Because what you said was something that will always stay with me, Verona. Where's Mom? Not, 'I love you, Dad.' Not, 'How was your night?' Or any caring at all. I wish I could say I've never felt as alone as I did that night. You didn't smile at me. You gave me nothing. You did smile at your hungover mum the next morning." "Ah," Verona said. Avery, standing at the stairs, at the far end of the hallway, hugged herself, feeling uneasy. "Writing on the wall, like I said. I should have known that she resented me, that she didn't care one iota about me." "People grow apart?" Verona said. "No, Verona," Mr. Hayward said. No, because I put in the effort. I pushed for couples counseling. I made concessions. I changed myself for her, in ways I still haven't come back from fully. I tried to close that gap, and she might as well have spat in my face for all it mattered. gaps happen if you let them. But I wasn't willing to let it happen like that. Our separation was her walking away from me. Walking away from us.
Ah, Verona said. Sucks.
Sucks? He asked. Is this the writing on the wall with you two? I put in all this effort. I spent all this time trying to communicate and reach out to you, and I get a sucks?
Really sucks? I don't know what to say.
Say you'll try. Say you'll act like a proper daughter. Say you'll spend time with me when I'm not making you. Lie down next to me, watch a movie with me like you used to. Connect with me.
He went from raising his voice to almost begging over the course of a few sentences. I've got a friend over, my new friend, Avery. She's cool.
And you'd rather spend time with her than me. Because she's cool.
I can spend time with you most nights. She's over for tonight. Verona looked back over her shoulder and saw Avery standing there. Avery couldn't help but feel like she'd seen something she shouldn't. Verona, for her part, didn't even flinch. Verona mentioned for Avery to go, indicating one of the doors.
Is that her?
Verona's dad asked.
Invite her in here. Let me cover myself up with a sheet. It's too hot, even with the AC.
Verona, head leaning against the doorframe by her dad's room, put one finger in her ear, out of sight of her dad, and winked at Avery. Avery hesitated, then plugged her ears. Verona pulled her finger from her ear, giving Avery a thumbs up. Avery withdrew her fingers from her ears and caught the end of Verona saying, think she heard just now.
You could go get her, bring her in. I should meet your friends.
I think I'm going to go do stuff with her. Projects and some fun stuff.
Go do that then. Fine. After I've worked my arse off for you for the whole last week. 2 jobs.
Verona motioned with her hand. Avery opened the door Verona had indicated, and let herself into Verona's room. The intervening walls muffled the words until she could only hear the voice, but not decipher what he was saying. It was mostly him talking. Tone only kind of came through. The room was actually dark, unlike the rest of the house, which had just felt that way, somehow. But there were posters with interesting images that might have been from music albums. Old art projects were hung up here and there, without much order or organization. Verona had said that she collected skulls, and sure enough, there were a few skull decorations, as well as the little one-toothed raccoon or beaver skull that they'd used for awakening. One was plaster, maybe, and there was a stone with a black ore running through it that had been shaped to look like a small fist-sized skull. Avery had to put in so much effort to keep her siblings from getting their paws on practice stuff, but Verona had a computer desk with a laptop shut and moved to one side, and it was scattered with the stuff. Her dad didn't ever walk into her room, look at what she was doing. There was a creepy sound, and it took her a second to make head or tails of it. Low, on, and off. Filtered through a wall with pretty good sound blocking, going out one open window and into another, was the sound of a man, at least 3 times their age, sobbing, in a way that was more childish than when Declan had cried in the car. She hadn't known about Lucy's deal with her stepdad, that Mr. Bader's actions had weighed on Lucy that much, that Lucy had been on the edge, that frustrated, that Verona could be so used to this weirdness with dining room chairs rooted to the floor, and a grown man sobbing, that she wasn't freaking out or losing it. Lucy had undersold it, kind of. Or things had gotten a bit worse since the last time Lucy had seen it.
Avery had never really been to many friends' houses. Olivia had lived the next town over, and except for one brief occasion when they'd been on their way to the pool, had mostly gone over there to do activities, then driven home. She'd been over to some houses of other homeschooled kids, but the only time she'd hung out in the other kids' rooms was when she'd been really young, and at that age, like with Kerry, a person's room or a portion of their room was less a mark of them as a person and more a place to store toys. Avery looked through some of the scattered notes. It looked like Verona scribbled notes down in one book, then copied them over in a more organized fashion to another. The mixture of the organized and the disorganized was something Avery could never get away with at her house. Any organization like this bundle of neatly stacked paintings would get disturbed by her siblings, but at the same time, Sheridan or her parents would give her a hard time if she left clothes scattered on the floor like this. Verona had some stuff piled up behind the door. Towels and hand towels, socks, teas, underwear, and what might have been a smock, daubed in bits of ink or paint. 3 mugs sat on the desk, one apparently for water for the watercolour, one empty, and the other with a trace of tea in it. Avery couldn't imagine herself sitting at that desk and not accidentally drinking the watercolour, or constantly picking up the empty mug. Mr. Hayward raised his voice, calling Verona's name. The door opened. "Want to go?" Verona asked. Avery nodded. "Verona!" Mr. Hayward hollered. He banged 3 times on the wall. "What?" Verona asked from her doorway. Speaking down the length of hallway and into the dimly lit room at the other end, she sounded impatient and, frankly, really unhappy, in a way Avery wasn't used to. "Turn off my light and take these dishes." "Let me get organized first," Verona said. She went to her desk and began gathering the books, note cards, and the sheaf of papers, sorting them into her bag. "Verona!" "Can you take my bag for me? I'll grab it downstairs." Avery nodded, picking up the striped canvas bag. Lighter than it looked. "What do you need?" Verona asked, as she stepped into the hallway. "Calling me again?" "My light and the dishes." "I heard you." "I wanted to make sure you heard. You conveniently forget sometimes." There was a pause and some clinking. The room at the end of the hall went nearly dark, lit only by the images on the big television that faced the bed. Mr. Hayward was around the corner and out of sight. Verona emerged, carrying 3 dinner plates, 2 mugs, 2 glasses, and various silverware. She indicated the stairs with a movement of her head, pausing in her room only long enough to get the 2 mugs. "Verona!" Mr. Hayward called out. "Can I ask you about one last thing?" Verona shook her head, lips pressed together. She slipped down the stairs without making a noise. Avery did her best to follow suit. At the kitchen, Verona sorted out the dishes, slotting them into the dishwasher. There were 3 thumps from upstairs. Verona ignored it, one finger going to her lips. The dishes made next to no sound as she finished up. She didn't look scared about it. She looked matter-of-fact. "What if he comes downstairs?" Avery asked, quiet. "I don't think he will. Not until he needs to use the bathroom, or he gets hungry." "That—" Avery started, before stopping herself. "What?" Verona asked. Avery felt like she should be afraid of offending her friend in questioning or challenging this, but Verona really didn't seem to care much. At most, there had been a fleeting look of upset as she had escaped into her room. "Lucy said something really similar about Paul last night. Like that he wouldn't tell the police. I don't remember the exact wording." Verona nodded. "I kind of understand if you know your dad, but I don't think she's seen that pool guy for a while now.
Yeah, huh, Verona murmured. Interesting.
Interesting? That's not how I'd put it.
I guess, Verona grabbed her bag. We have our individual monsters, and they occupy so much of our thinking. Avery followed Verona, as Verona strode over to the front door, stepping into her shoes without lacing them up. Verona waited until they were outside, and the door was gently shut before finishing. We get a pretty good idea of how they tick. We kind of have to.
I don't have a monster like that,
Avery said. Verona smiled, and it was a weird smile. Rueful, or weird.
What?
Avery asked.
Man,
Verona said, her tone changing. She pulled out her phone. Didn't mean to leave this early. I hope Lucy can make it.
Don't ignore me, Avery said. Say what you were thinking.
Verona looked at her.
Please.
Verona nodded, a little too fast, not making eye contact, like she was thinking. She was so good at lying, she could seamlessly pull off that thing where she'd said Avery hadn't heard Verona's dad. But this stumped her? Can I hug you? Verona asked. Would that be weird?
If you need a hug, that wouldn't be weird at all.
I don't, Verona said. She stepped closer and wrapped her arms around Avery. I hope you never have to deal with that kind of thing. I think you will, and it could be tonight, tomorrow, 10 or 20 years from now, but I really hope you don't.
That'd be nice.
Avery floundered for a response. Verona's pocket vibrated against Avery's side. Verona pulled back. Lucy! She put the phone to her ear. Disconcerted, Avery stepped back a bit. Yeah, Verona said. The 2 trees? Yeah. See you there. She ended the call, then put the phone away. Avery looked back toward the house, with the slightly uneven lawn, the garden that lined the front and part of the side of the house, bounded in with squared-off blocks of stone, but that didn't have any plants at all, with a leaning garage and no lights on from within the relatively dark interior. Verona sidled up beside Avery and looked at the house as well. If we're quiet, he should be asleep when we get back, and we can be up and doing something before he's awake. Sorry, I thought that since he came home and went straight to his room to lie down, that he'd be out of our way. Avery wasn't sure what to say. We ought to go near the fairy cave to rendezvous with Lucy, Verona said. You up for it?
Yeah,
Avery said.
I mean, I gotta, right? If I'm gonna back you guys up, we just need to be smarter about that.
Verona smiled. Come on. It was a relief to get away from that house. The walk over the bridge and down the rocky shore was a nice one. There were more people out with their dogs, which were splashing in the water. One seemed intent on getting a fish that was in the shallows. Its owner was trying to stop it and get a hold of the leash. What fun, doggo. I hope you get your exercise. Where do you want to be in 20 years? Verona asked. What do you want your life to look like? What kind of practitioner are you? Do you have a job?
I haven't really thought about it. Ever since the first night where we saw the Hungry Choir, I've been feeling like I spent my whole life, until recently, unable to see more than a few feet in front of my nose. Then the Pam thing, it was like... I thought I was expanding my thinking, and it takes Lucy yelling at me for me to realize that I'm still only seeing a few feet in front of my nose. And the fairy used that against me. I've been thinking about the fairy, Verona said. I think it's more likely they used it for themselves. They can't do stuff against us. They can and have to entertain themselves. As a matter of instinct. There's that word again, huh? Avery asked. You didn't really answer my question, by the way. I don't know, Avery said. Don't people spend most of their lives figuring that out? My mom said she didn't know what she wanted to do in life until it came to having kids.
Yeah, Verona said.
Why are you asking?
I'm still trying to figure some stuff out.
Is this the same sort of stuff you were saying you'd think about for Lucy?
Kinda, Verona said. I see her. They stood near the 2 birch trees that met to form a kind of arch, partway down the rocky shore. Water had once settled or ran along the base of the 2 trees, and had stained them. More weather had stained the top, and the branches had grown entangled. Lucy wore the same clothes she had worn during the school day. A tight tee with the Mission Canada logo, and loose-fitting shorts, a sweatshirt tied around her waist. She wore her hair in a low ponytail, and carried her bag over one shoulder. The school day had been muted. They hadn't chatted much. Lucy had wanted to leave Verona alone. Avery had wanted to be sensitive with Lucy, and accepted the first signals that Lucy didn't want to talk. They'd recapped only briefly at lunchtime, helped by the fact that Verona had heard the Paul story before. All she'd needed was an update on what had happened last night. "Hey, friend," Verona said. Her hands were in the pockets of her denim shorts. She wore a broad striped tee that parted at the collar, with a button that was never supposed to be done up. Avery didn't know the fashion term. Like a polo, without a collar. "Where are we at?" Lucy asked. "I'll be the backup you need," Verona said. Lucy nodded, smiled a bit. "Thank you." "I spent a while thinking last night about the gifts we got. I know we still need to get the last few from Guillermo and Mary Chica, and there's a bunch left to collect from the others as we do the last interviews, but I put some thought toward the fairy ones in particular." Verona pulled her bag off one shoulder, got it around in front of her, and pulled out the sheaf of papers. "I appreciate that," Lucy said. "We'll have to go over it together, figure out if there's anything to watch or to use, before we use the gifts." Verona nodded. "I drew while I was doing my thinking. Did you a picture? You can put them on your wall near your bed, or beside your bed, along with a marker. The diagrams on the back double as spell cards. I wanted to make you something, or give you something, but the complex diagrams eat power just by being there. And I think if we make too many of those, the locals might get antsy. We're leeching power from them for anything we're not paying for with some other tricks." Lucy looked over the pile of papers, turning some over. Avery could interpret the circles and diagrams. That one, it had radiating, rotating fire, at a high intensity and high output. On the other side, it was a cute octopus painting. "You'll want to be careful with that one," Verona said. "I kind of thought, if the Hungry Choir showed up in your room again or whatever, you could blow a hole in the wall and run. Maybe. I let my imagination run wild because it's really all I'm good for. I like the idea of being your backup even when I'm not there, by having given you those." Lucy hugged the pages to her chest, eyes down. "Sorry if it's not your style," Verona said. "The art, I mean. You're my best friend. Things by or about you are worth a place on my wall." "Can I hug you?" Verona asked. "A hug?" "I've been thinking a lot about what our friendship was, and is, and where I want it to go. I remember we fought a bunch when we were kids, and we'd both get into a game in very different ways, or the time we did sailing camp, and you loved it and I hated it. And we made up with hugs. It feels like we've been drifting apart by fractions, after every fight. Or, I called them serious times to Avery. I think it was. When life gets shitty, after every one, we don't feel quite as close as we did." "You think, hugging like when we were kids is going to help that?" Lucy asked. "Can't hurt," Verona said. She swallowed. "I don't want to drift apart over the course of our lives, so I'm going to try harder. I promise." "Have to be careful with promises," Avery said. Nah, Verona said. She looked off to the side, and her eyes turned purple. This one's important to make and keep. I have to make it something I keep in mind. Lucy hugged Verona. Both of them seemed better and more at ease than they'd been when they stood 2 feet apart. Lucy made a hand motion, and Avery joined the hug. I'll be better too, Avery pledged, her eyes shut. She felt Lucy's head move in a nod. They broke the hugs. Verona stuck her hands in her pockets, her bag still slung over one shoulder, dangling. It was getting dark. The sun was down. How did things go with your mum? Verona asked. I told her about Paul, mostly. She told me I could be super grounded, or I could go talk to someone. I chose to talk. I don't know that's going to go when I can't lie, but... Tricky, Verona said. There's a chance the curse I set might get lifted pretty soon. She's going to reach out to Paul. I think he might actually pick up and answer her after yesterday. I nailed the coward curse in 3 times. If he can overcome that, and overcome his natural instincts, he's free and clear.
Why?
The 3 of them turned. In the shadows by conifer trees with long needles, Alpeana crouched. Hey, we came to see you, Avery said.
Are you telling me that my night's hard work is all for nothing?
Alpeana asked. Night's hard work? Lucy asked.
Aye, but it's like subcontracting, Ken. Spirits and oozes have got a bunch of minds to put to gradual change, and dreams are a way to go about doing it. I spent the better half of last night planting subtle ideas in people's heads. This guy, he can't be trusted. He'll turn tail and run. Isn't it so weird he spent so long living at home with his ma? What's going on there?
Sticking him with a label? Lucy asked. Nothing more?
Oh aye, lassie. If you wanted more, you can't be lying in little ways all the time. Makes it easy to shake. And they say a curse you can shake can go back to the sender, stronger than it was. You're lucky he's no much of a shaking sort.
Goblins neglected to mention that, Lucy said, her eyebrow raised.
If you be wanting thoughtful sorts, goblins aren't the way to go, lassie. Most can't see much further than the next bloody nose they can inflict.
What would happen if it landed on me again? Lucy asked. Could I shake it by meeting the same terms?
Owning up to your wrongs done in cowardices?
Alpeana asked from the dark. As the sunset waned and the shadows deepened, the mare emerged more and more.
Aye, you could shake it, but then it might go back to him, depending. Chromatic balance is an intent, innit? I can't say I know for sure, though.
Lucy nodded. What are you thinking? Verona asked. I'm thinking I'm okay with that. If he can shake it, it does land on me because he's angry, or because I did mess up. That's fair, isn't it?
Well, I did some good work last night, so I'll be hoping it sticks, if you don't mind me saying.
Avery smiled a bit. I don't want anyone to suffer, though.
Suffering's the way of it sometimes. What's for you'll go by you. Speaking of, as nice as it is to have a blether, I really should be saying to my rounds. We can talk, and I can answer your questions, but I'm going to address some doings while we're at it.
How bad is this going to be? Avery asked.
Well, since you asked, I've got some easy early ones lined up. An old codger, bitter and black-hearted. Oh, I can tell you, if anyone deserves a fitful sleep, it's him. Should be easy on the wee conscience when he beat his pretty wife in lanes. And nae court will convict him or punish him for it, so it's just his own mind. He sleeps early and wakes often, so I like to go by, make sure he's handled early on, or I'll sometimes miss my chance.
I'm not sure I like picking on a defenceless old man, Avery said. She felt uneasy.
He will nae sleep easy, no matter what happens, lassie. But if we see him, might be that he'll change his mind about things, or find it in him to make amends.
Might be we're just twisting the knife, though, and nothing will come of it, Avery said.
So aye, You didn't have to come, but I thought if you would, it would be easy to do it this way.
Avery folded her arms.
Verona, lassie.
Verona made an inquisitive sound. She looked like she'd just stirred from a thought.
Your da, he's due. Fell asleep by his telly. I can skip him, aye. Doesn't hurt that much.
Oh, Verona said. You don't have to skip him. If there's a chance of growth or him settling into a role he's supposed to fill. Verona! Avery raised her voice, scolding. I don't mind, Verona said. Really? Actually, I'd feel way better about going into my house than some strange old man's place, seeing how you do what you do.
Aye, that's one way of it.
We are. The children are here. Take care not to get near me, pestilent thing. Avery's heart hammered. Something in her perspective had changed, and the fact that she found herself reacting, her breathing short, had nothing to do with the woman's near nudity, nor Quiérum's imposing size. They approached from the cave, but they were only visible through the arch. The view of the same path across the shore from the side of the arch didn't reveal them. Lucy put a hand on Avery's shoulder. Gifts. I do want to get these out of the way. Lucy, a gift that will be useful tonight, Marichica said. My last one to give you all. Can you write it down? Lucy asked. My dear, I can show you. It is so much better to show than to tell. Please write it down. We'll review it. Are you sure? Marichica asked. The smile that spread across her face was a bit sly, and, Avery reminded herself, entirely false. This face was not hers. She'd given Avery a glimpse of another face entirely. When someone tells you something, listen, Avery thought. Whether it's a friend saying a teacher is a dick to them, or a fairy telling you she's delivering a trap to your hands. Maybe even a teacher saying she has to maintain boundaries. Ugh. Marichica may well have shown Avery what she was, and by the expression she wore now, it was hard not to feel like they were playing into her hands. But that was the inevitability, right? Marichica withdrew a piece of paper from the folds of her wing, walking to one side as she wrote on it. It freed Quiérum to approach without drawing too near to her. Avery, Quiérum said. Can you write it down? As you wish, he said. John told me to keep it simple. I will. You said it was better. You said hers would be a lesson, and you weren't wrong. Marichica would change you into something you don't recognize. I would highlight the you that you want to be. It's subtler and more blunt at the same time. You'll want to be careful all the same. Avery frowned. A man with wealth will soon find himself surrounded by so-called friends, with no idea if they like him or his money. So will the greatest swordsman in the world, who attracts people by way of celebrity. Self-assuredness has its own draw. People without it would seek to find it. I feel like if I had that much self-assuredness, I'd be even less me than when I was Cal, Avery said. I may have to think on this one and discuss it with my friends before I use it. Good, Quiérum said. He handed Avery a slip of paper. Alpeana was getting antsy. Marichica returned with her own paper. She ducked as Quiérum swung an arm in her direction and tittered. There was no cave echo to mutate the sound. She held out a folded paper to Lucy, but held onto it as Lucy gripped it. Become a bit of moonlight, Marichica said. Or a bit of smoke, or a bit of flame. Lucy tugged the paper free of Marichica's hand. There's a deposit of glamour in there. Be careful when unfolding it. Lucy nodded. You smell of goblins, and your lips taste like a curse, Marichica told Lucy. Be careful.
Curses and lowly practices travel paths of least resistance, and the most common path of least resistance that draws lightning from the heavens, rain from the sky, and light from the sun is down. Sink too far, and you may find it all tumbling down on your head. Noted, Lucy said.
Can we get going now?
Alpeana asked.
I don't want to be late.
Do you have a boss that yells at you? Verona asked.
Ugh, no. It's only the whole uncountable cosmos and the immutable confabulation of everything breathing down my neck, Ken. I've no been much late to work, and I'm not about to start the now, am I? When it's tied into the very fabric of my being?
Really now? Lucy asked. But you can pick and choose who you do? Skip us or Verona's dad? She's anxious, Avery said, giving Lucy a nudge. And she's cooperating. And she's being nice enough to hear us out and give Verona's dad a pass, if Verona wants, which I really think Verona should want. Verona sighed.
So who's first?
Alpeana asked. My dad, I guess. Avery frowned at Verona. Go easy on him? Verona asked.
Right, can do. One of you take another by the hand. I can only tug you along using my hands, unless you want to take a hold of this hair of mine.
Avery said. The hair was very greasy and had a lot of stuff in it. Alpeana was cute in her own weird way, but not so cute Avery wanted to hold her hair. She took Lucy's hand. Alpeana's hand was cool to the touch, and slippery without being wet, in a way that made Avery's hair stand on end. Alpeana took Verona with the other hand, and then tugged. Avery's stomach was left by the shore, as they made the quick trip back to Verona's house. They were dropped onto the stairs. Son of a... Lucy swore, as she slid down a few steps before getting her feet beneath her.
You shut your wheesht,
Alpeana hissed.
You'll wake him. Though I suppose if you do, you're not as bad off as you might be in another situation. Dad, I'm home. No?
Yeah, Verona murmured. Alpeana scaled the wall to the ceiling and travelled the length of the front hall. I don't like this, Avery said. Hurting your dad? It's a bad dream, Verona said. I've asked people for help. I've argued with him. I've tried to do what he said he wanted. I've ignored him. I've spent whole days at a time with him. And maybe you're just hitting a sad, messed up guy while he's down, Avery asked. Maybe, Verona said. But if there's a chance it changes him... Avery floundered, wanting to change Verona's mind. But she felt paralysed in a very similar way to when she'd seen Lucy facing down Paul. That had been so angry. And this felt so sad. Verona, who seemed so unflappable so often, looked low. He's your monster that you've been wrestling with, I guess. But it feels wrong to me. Come on, Lucy said. They crossed the hall. Alpeana was on the ceiling. Below her was a man that was maybe 80 pounds overweight, wearing an undershirt that stretched across his belly, the stubble grown in after a morning shave, his cheeks either greasy or moist from crying. The plates Verona had taken hadn't been all of them, or Mr. Hayward had gotten more and put them by the side of the bed. There were some food wrappers stuffed in the drawer. The television was on, and the sole source of illumination in the room, very blue. How bad does this have to get before I say stop? Avery asked herself. Alpeana bathed blackness and drained stuff. Her hair extended, reaching down like it was liquid. It buried Mr. Hayward's face, extended into his open mouth, smothered him. Verona shifted her footing, arms folded. He twitched, turning his head as if to escape it, then moved his hand, reaching up lazily, with no sense of what he was fighting against. An arm, thin, feminine, and strong, reached out of the tide of black stuff and grabbed him by the wrist, pinning his arm down to the bed. Stop! Avery turned her head.
I'm calling Uncle. I'm sorry, Alpy, Verona said. She looked agitated. Her eyes were wet. Fuck, wimping out already. This isn't wimping out, Lucy said. Verona made a face. The darkness receded, drawing back up to the figure on the ceiling. Alpeana stared down at them with eyes that had no white to them.
It costs me a wee bit of something reaching in. If I'm not finishing the job, I'm not getting my pay from the cosmic titan below, you ken. I can't be stopping and starting all night.
Hi, Verona said, affecting the accent unconsciously. Sorry, I'll make it up to you.
I hope so. I like you lassies. I'm trying to be fair to you.
Yeah, Verona said.
Another night, you think?
We wanted to interview you. I have questions in my notebook.
How about you get your notebook out and figure out what you're going to ask me? And I'm going to go make sure this old codger sheds a tear of regret for the violence he did to his sweet pretty wife in Bairns.
Avery frowned.
It's what I am, lassie. If you want me to stop, you might need to put out a permanent end to me.
I don't want to do that, Avery said. Do you hurt them in the dreams? Verona asked, looking at her dad.
Aye, but not with blood and death. I'm best with sorrow and sweet, drawn out long. With ones like this one, the old codger, I just show them what they miss in their short-sightedness. A wee taste of the life they could have lived. And a long, hard ride, and the sorrow of knowing it's their own sorry fault.
And the little girl you mentioned? Lucy asked.
Aye, that's sweet and sorrow in its own way. Might leave a bairn a bit more melancholy than they should be, but it keeps the wheel ticking, and puts her where the cosmos need her to be.
Reconsidering? Avery asked Verona. Why? Verona asked, not taking her eyes off her dad. Are you? He tries hard, and he does the basics of what a dad's supposed to do, according to those guys from the government. Feeds me, shelters me, makes sure I go to school. Just... he's broken, and he won't put himself back together. I don't think he's where he's supposed to be. Then, Lucy started. Verona wasn't done. But I don't want him to hurt. I don't want to see him hurt. He makes me more miserable than anyone, and I feel exhausted and even a bit of dread when he comes in the door. But I love him. I want to not live in his house, at least after I'm 18. And I'm not even sure I'll come back to visit him when I'm gone. But I love him.
I should be going, lassies. Are you coming or are you going?
Verona put out a hand. Avery took Lucy's hand and took Alpeana's. Another jump. To a different end of town. Alpeana placed them on grass. Verona stumbled. Lucy fell over.
It'll just be a few minutes. Make yourself comfortable, aye?
Yeah, Verona said. Alpeana slipped beneath the door, the entirety of her body squishing down into the stuff like tangles of pubes and hair pulled from the drains, dyed black instead of red and brown. Lucy pulled her notebooks from her bag. Avery paced, getting her hat out of her bag and putting it on, so they could at least break some of the connections. The back door opened. All three girls jumped. But it was Alpeana. She looked alarmed. What's wrong? Avery asked.
Miss!
Alpeana called out.
Miss! Miss!
Avery turned, then turned again. Miss was in the doorway, her silhouette blocked in large part by the door. What is it? Miss asked.
Interference.
Alpeana said.
Someone got here first.
Another mare? Avery asked.
Oh no.
Alpeana said. She looked agitated, crouching down.
The echo I should have used to answer his dream. Someone tore it apart for pieces, Ken. Took the eyes. They're looking in.
Someone, not something? Miss asked, as she strode into the house. Alpeana followed. The girls followed Alpeana.
Aye, we've got a practitioner spying on things here.
These 3 girls are the only practitioners in Kennet, with the exceptions of the cases of Matthew, who cannot practice, and Edith, who isn't human at her core, and they are too preoccupied to do this. You're sure? Lucy asked. Positive.
It's an outsider, miss,
Alpeana said. Yes, Miss said. The girls entered the bedroom. A man, face covered in blackness, was lying on a bed, shirtless and sweaty. Beside him, flickering, was the ghost of the woman that had to be his wife. Her eyes were missing, with only a slash of darkness in their place.
You girls best be going home or coming with us,
Alpeana said.
I'm warning you, though. We're going to be passing through some right wrong places if we're going to track down these eyes. The fella or filly who took them, and we need to figure out why they're here.
Avery hesitated. Believe them when they say stuff. They say these places are wrong, then they'll be pretty rough, right? But going to these places was the reason I wanted to practice in the first place. I wanted to explore worlds. All 3 of us, or none of us, Verona said to Lucy. Why are you saying that to me? Lucy asked. Are you thinking I'm going to back down? No. We were going to visit these places anyway. We have to. Then that's a yes? Verona asked. Because I'm trying my best to be good. I am. Avery? Yes, Avery whispered. Let's go. Let's figure this out.
This has been a fan-made chapter reading of the web serial Pale by J.C. McCrae, read by me, mcgruntman, with Alpeana's voice kindly provided by UngainlyMantis. The original text can be found at palewebserial.wordpress.com. If you'd like to donate to the author, please go to patreon.com/wildbow.